All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the SmallCast, a small known podcast. Today, I'm joined with two absolute just geniuses, if I
Whoa,
do.
whoa, stop.
I
My
will
God.
glad they're pretty great. I'm also diabolically biased, but I will first let them introduce themselves. First off, please, either one of you go. I don't want to choose.
Sure. My name's Cameron Daxon. I am with Small Loan Studio. This is the first time I've heard SmallCast,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mhm.
that threw me in a good way. So I just
Yeah,
want to acknowledge that SmallCast just came out,
keeping you on
and
your toes.
it was very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you need me to do besides introduce myself? I'm Cameron Daxon. I work with Small Loan.
Well, introducing yourself is first, what you done at Small Loan, and also I want to cover our other amazing person as well, and then we'll get right into the topic for the day.
Roll. I've worked on Santa's Secret as well as the Ouroboros Express, and I was involved in the latest round of the pitching process.
Exquisite, exquisite. And who's this other genius amongst us?
Me? So, yes, my name is Najmah Salam. You can call me Nudge. At Small Loan Studio, I've directed the Ouroboros Express. I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I dabble here. I've got my fingers and pies over there. But most recently, I designed the pitching process for you wonderful folks.
Excellent, excellent. And for those who don't know, my name is Armoni Boone. I am the marketing lead here at Small Loan. And I also actually took part of the pitching process. So that's what we're talking about. Today's topic is about how we pitched internally, how the process truly changed my brain chemistry, and I'm sure it changed Cam's as well.
I'd
Hi
say
for
It changed
Bali.
my life.
it
My skin is
yeah.
clear.
I'm a
Everything's
functioning being at this point. Yes, yes,
I
yes, yes.
see sound now after this pitching process. It's going to have a very hinged and normal person conversation about this. But
Mhm.
overall,
Mhm.
first things first, Naj, I'd love to hear initially what was so different about this pitching process? Why are we
Mhm.
gassing it up? What
Mhm.
about it was so significant?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it might be helpful if I talk a little, like rewind a little bit as well and just say why we have a pitching process. I feel like it's normal to us within the studio, but every time I've spoken to it about to other people, they're like, "Oh, you guys pitch your ideas internally." And yes, yes, we do. It's always been a way for us to get everybody's buy-in on an idea. I think that's been really important, especially as a volunteer studio. We're running off motivation and dreams.
Hmm.
Uh,
Renewable resources.
and so we need to make sure that whenever we work on a project, we need to make sure that people are really bought in on it. And so we have had a couple of pitching rounds before, but for this particular one that I designed, I really felt like it needed to be more robust. Just having observed past pitching rounds and having won one myself. And one of the things that I did think about was I wish that we had been a bit more diligent in the past so that the ideas were set up for success later on down the road. And so, what was different this time is that we had more clearer guidelines around a presentation and like accompanying documentation that was submitted. Whereas I feel like before I think people just pretty much presented in front of each other in a Discord call, all of us sort of low key in our jammies. So it was a little bit more. There was a little bit more gravitas this time around.
Absolutely. And I want to say for those listening that this process that Naj implemented also took a course of months, right? This
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like we're gonna meet on Saturday and talk about our new game. No, this not only did it occur over many weeks, there
Mm-hmm.
were office hours,
Yes.
there was a whole committee, there were like specialized experts per discipline. People actually volunteered there, like all the UX designers, the narrative people took
Yeah.
time for some of these pitches. And Cam, I would love to hear about your pitch, what your game was about, and its journey through this
The
refined
journey.
pitching
Well, I
process.
think it's
Journey.
worth talking about how. So originally, about a year ago, maybe a year and a month ago, was when we had the last round of pitches. I think. Am I wrong
Yeah,
about that?
I think
dang,
About
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
coming up on a little over a year, and it like went pretty smoothly. And the project we pitched was really really cool. I was a briefly part of that project for a couple of months before just life stuff kind of got in the way, and I had to step back. But one of the things that I think Naj really did a great job of setting up was like, let's try to really not scale down, but focus on scope of your pitches. And so several months ago, as you alluded to, Armani, and I think it was December, maybe January, we put out a survey. I should say I should put out a survey of like, hey, we want to do this pitching project. When should we do it? And overwhelmingly, people were like, a couple months from now.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, should we do it at the end of the month? Should we do it in 6 weeks? Should we do it in a couple of months? And everybody was like, a couple of months, please. Which was like, okay, so we're all gonna have 2.5, 3 months to put together our proposals, and like we have a deadline. We have a here's what to expect on the day of the pitch. Like it was very structured. And then it's like, okay, because we have 3 months of runway, we're gonna fill in that time with useful workshops, with feedback, with things of that nature. So that took me to get back to me. How that influenced my pitch was, rather than, because we all have a million ideas of like games that we would want to make or think would be cool to have made. And with the luxury of a long pitching process, it was like, well, let's like really drill down and flesh out an idea. So it started off as like, I want to do kind of like an arcade side scroller, kind of turned into, well, what if it's really like heavily narrative and this kind of sprawling little world. There's an oxymoron for you. So the game that I pitched was called Folklorica, and it was inspired by some Nordic folk tales. There's a tongue twister.
You got this. Go on, baby. You're doing it.
Nordic folk tales.
Nordic
folk tales.
Red leather, yellow leather, and so I originally read this, like flipped through this book back in like December or January, because I got it at a book sale during the holidays, and so I had a couple of months to kind of sit on this idea and really think about it. And what started off as one thing eventually turned into a narrative-driven, kind of side-scrolling Metroidvania kind of game. Was eventually the process that the game that I landed on. So yeah. And we can talk a little bit more about how it started as one thing and it went to something else, but I want, obviously, I want to hear about your pitch too and how yours.
Yes, we have to hear about your pitch.
Okay.
Okay, no, stop.
Here I go. So I also, in the same way, hearing about when we were going to pitch, and when there were whispers that we were pitching, I immediately was like, I need to get on it, because I wanted to be prepared. Or rather, like, life was just stressful, and I found that I was just the most creative at 2 a.m. in bed typing on my phone. So my idea was called Sovereign Key. I was able to publish a poem under the same name, and the whole idea was just building on the sci-fi trope of like pocket dimensions and how are they made, how are they sustained, what happens when they're empty. And I was like way too into like the idea of like throne worlds in Warhammer and throne worlds in Destiny and like just throughout different sci-fi things. I was like, okay, this is a cool trope. I gotta dig in. Poem was published. It was published under the name Throne Worlds, but I was like, I'd rather it be called Sovereign Key or something that just a bit more distinct. And the poem was just about that. And in the game being made, I was like, okay, how can we drill down into this concept a bit more? I originally wanted something that was like tabletop. I felt like it was like our studio is very much built on with a bunch of writers. And I feel like tabletop is a strong medium to marry mechanics and written work in a very fluid way. It was also over time, and we can speak on this more, Cam, the idea did grow and develop and change. So it's like, all right, what happens in a sovereign key? How does one deal with someone who makes a pocket dimension or vacates it? And it just was just another small, sprawling world where that idea could just grow and develop. And I guess I could talk about like how it kind of changed over time with the process, and then I will toss it back to the two of you. I think it was tabletop, and then it became a hybrid tabletop thing, because also our studio has a bunch of writers. On the flip side, I was like, what if we coded? What if we got really into implementation? What if we got our hands dirty? Because we see so many job openings that require a level of implementation. So I was like, let's choose the easiest game engine for a writer to work with, Unreal Engine. I'm being so serious right now. Not a hint, scrap, a modicum of sarcasm. But
I actually don't know if that's sarcasm.
oh no, that's the problem. It was all sarcasm.
Got it. Okay. Great.
My delivery was too dry.
It was too dry.
I figured Unreal was Banana's request. So that was the initial idea, and I was like, how can this be something to build buy-in for the rest of our team? So I kind of had to juggle the two parts of it. My biggest concern with pitching was making this idea make sense. It was like a lot of research on how tabletop players felt about these hybrid tabletop systems. Is there a need to have a digital apparatus? What people like, what people didn't like. And there were other things that I appreciate as a player, like Roll20, obviously. There's Tabletop Simulator. There were other virtual tabletops, like One More Multiverse, which unfortunately had shut down. But at its time, especially during peak lockdown, it was such a big deal.
Right.
And then I think while working on this pitch, I think Wizards of the Coast made Sigil. It was like something for Dungeons and Dragons. So I was like deep in the sauce of this hybrid tabletop space, looking at how users felt. And I basically fell upon the sentiment of people like a virtual tabletop, but they don't want it to be like, it's not a requirement to play a tabletop game.
Right.
So over time, I was like, what if we, in this pitch, had a core rule set for Sovereign Key based on a lot of the games that I thought were cool for the table analog version, and we pitch buy-in for the digital version, or the digital companion. I called it an arcade-style toolkit, as a way for a lot of our writers to just get comfortable with coding. So that was how my idea eventually grew. The crux of my pitch was, can I make this thing make sense? And can I get other writers to want to be like, I'll try it out. Now, Cam, I'd love to hear about how your pitch evolved, and then I want to hear Naj's thoughts on us trying to shoehorn everything.
Sure.
This flow chart that...
I need those opera glasses and be like...
Yes, Naj is actively judging us throughout the entire process. I felt it, but she didn't say anything to not talk.
She didn't need to.
That is true. That is true.
So where I come in on it is we talked a lot about, or at least for me, I talked a lot about how I was really trying to be conscious of skill. We should also be clear, neither of our pitches got chosen. Like,
that's also true. That's full disclosure for everyone listening right now. Our pitches weren't chosen, which is completely fine. I think it's also really funny. But in a later date, future episode maybe, and we're going to actually highlight the actual winners. If we do that now, that's spoilers. The people who did one, their ideas were amazing. They gave wonderful presentations. And there was even a little Q&A. Like, there's a process. We're really excited to talk about them. But yes, Cam's right. We did not.
I feel like it's worth mentioning. I don't know. Like I feel like we're like talking around. Like
we're talking around the true thing. No, for real. That should be in the thumbnail. We lost, but it was good.
My God.
It's like, oh.
Losers. I'm kidding. No. It was really. It's incredibly funny. Actually, that's like a question for later. But I think it low key for me. I think it was good for me because it helped me.
I think we should talk about that. Like, we'll get to it. We'll get to it.
That's later.
It's worth talking about. So, how my game sort of evolved. So, a lot of this process for me was trying to keep scope in mind, and also to present something that I wouldn't normally present. So I grew up playing 2D platformers, Mario and all of that. So I was very much like, well, what if I tried to pitch a game that I'm not like a diehard fan of old school games. Like, I like them, I grew up with them, but it's not like the only games I play. The type of stuff I play now is probably different than the thing that I pitched, really.
Yeah.
So the original idea was like, I want it to be as close to Mega Man as possible. Like old school Mega Man, you jump, you shoot, and that's kind of it. But then with like, okay, let's like layer a story on top of it. Just because I thought like, well, it's different than what I would normally pitch. It's different from what this group that we're in right now has made in the past. It's a little more like arcadey, action forward than like heady narrative.
Right.
So that was kind of the original idea. It was like, let's like something simple, not simplistic, but like mechanically simple, and focused. And then I started thinking like, well, maybe it should be more of a platformer, like more like Celeste, more like focus more on the action of platforming.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of started to take me into a territory of like, oh, I don't really know how to design this. And obviously, the idea would be to onboard like talented designers and to onboard programmers and stuff like that who can do that. I felt like I didn't have as much of a strong vision of like a level design that you kind of need for a really good platformer, So the longer I'll say this, I liked that the process was long. The longer it went on, the less confident I got in my pitch. Just because I was like, there's so much stuff I don't know. There's so much stuff like I don't have. Sorry, my camera's all over the place. There's so much stuff that it's like I mean, you made a joke about Unreal Engine earlier, and I didn't. And the reason I couldn't tell if you were joking was because I'm like, I don't know if it's hard to develop in Unreal. Like,
no, it literally.
You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh, this game in Unreal. I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah, exactly. Truly. So and again, I'm sure we'll dig. We'll dig into like what the process of the document looked like, the pitching document, but. The longer it went on, and the more the pitch sort of shifted and changed, the more I realized maybe the initial vision was pretty strong. Yeah. And then the longer it went on, the more I was like, maybe this is not quite as rock solid as I had at the initial spark of inspiration.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, that's just me. Like, I don't know how.
No, I'll keep it a being with you. Very similarly, it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect sort of situation where it's just like I was just quiet about. Like, no one cares about this. Like, this makes no kind of sense, but I'm in too deep. I've spent too much time in this to give up. And I'm split between talking about that moment for me in the pitching process and hearing Naj's thoughts. Actually, I'd rather hear your thoughts about the process, seeing us navigate through the process, and as we spill more beans about our insecurities. I love that. Well, how did you destroy us, Naj? What was your thought process?
Yeah, right. How can we really mess these people up? This is real quick. I do want to ask you, Naj, just because I think it's worth talking about. Why didn't you want to pitch a game this time around?
Well, I think for me, I was coming fresh off a job and I was recovering from burnout as well. But I still wanted to be involved with the studio in some way. And so I thought rather than kind of like going all in like I did with the Ouroboros Express, I can play like more of a supportive function this time around because I really love like seeing everybody work on their ideas and bouncing off each other. And so, yeah, like you mentioned earlier, we had what we called office hours. So there were set times for pitchers who could come in and talk to other people and bounce their ideas off each other. And so sometimes we'd have somebody who was good with programming or maybe like UI UX sit in on one of those sessions, or somebody who is narrative representative. And you guys would come in, right, and be like, okay, well, here's where I'm at so far. Can I pick your brain about this, or can I get your opinion about this? Sometimes it was just us three. As well, and we'd be like,
it was often just us.
Just yucking it up.
Yeah, and we were like talking to each other, and it's just one of those things where like sometimes you'll make something available, and not everybody takes it up just because like they can't for some reason, or they're like they're off doing their own thing. Yeah, exactly. It's just like weird timings, whatever, which is totally fine. But I feel good that we like had the option available, and it's interesting because I really loved watching you both work through your ideas because you actually made them more like tangible as we went on. And I think like that happens with any creative things. Sometimes you start out with like a seed of something, you're like, oh, this is great, and then the more it grows and the more you're like shaping it, you're like, actually it needs this and it needs that, and you start spotting the gaps in your knowledge about like the particular thing of your project. I've certainly gone through it myself as well. I even remember like on the Ouroboros Express, I was like, oh, I had all these ideas about like there would be a map, and there would also be like each of the characters which have their own cabins that we could see. And then as time went on, I was like, there's no way we're gonna be able to do that, So it happens. I think it was a very natural part of the process, and I'm really glad that you guys took up the opportunity to do that to really strengthen the your ideas over time.
Yeah, I think having a refined pitching process or just something that is so rigorous, I'm glad that it challenged us because like in the real world, or not even the real world, wherein it's just like this Small Loan's totally a studio simulator.
Yeah.
You can have grand ideas, and I
Mm-hmm.
think there isn't a shortage of creativity. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's when it comes down to scope, when
Yeah.
it comes down to what's mechanically viable,
Yeah.
based on staffing, based on what considerations we have for the engine and
Yeah.
onboarding and training. These are a lot of considerations that you might not have to grapple with during a game jam,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or you do, but that's for like you have to figure it out for like in like the first 3 hours and
Yeah.
just keep running. You aren't in a situation where you have to think, okay, the goal is to provide a pitch for a game that can only be 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
How
Mm-hmm.
are you going to scope out your time? How
Mm-hmm.
are you going to train people with
Yeah.
the engine you're considering? What There are so many variables that you as the pitcher
Mm-hmm.
need to account for.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think like oh, yeah, no worries. No, it essentially was a lot we had to figure out over time. I think that also, to Cam's point, spoke to like the meme of the guy looking at the server room, just being like, "What are we doing here?" Like that literally is what happened because you have to know, or at the
Mm-hmm.
very least, you have to admit you don't know, and that is where we're going to figure things out. So like with the way
Yeah.
my idea evolved, like we went from a poem that becomes a game
Mm-hmm.
and then that has some sort of digital component. And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of landed on this is a tabletop game where you're navigating this pocket dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And the digital component can be separate, but accompany it where it's like WarioWare styled mini games that like
Yeah.
connect to it. And the biggest hurdle one was, hey, what is this? Like, why?
Yeah.
What about this is
Right.
fun and why are we even doing this? And I'm like, dang, I gotta find the fun. But then two, it was then on the mechanical level, okay, it's essentially designing two games that can operate independently and in tandem. I think a
Mm.
lot of the idea was shaped around staffing on what the studio needs were. I know Unreal isn't the choice engine for everyone because it is pretty hard, and I've just seen
I don't
people
know
just
that.
yeah, no, it's fine.
We've established
A
Cam
lot
doesn't
of
know that.
people, for the record, point of information, no, it was a true consideration in knowing that it was difficult, which is why I chose that WarioWare micro game format because game design wise, it is a very straightforward method. So for those listening who've never played Wario, it's a style of mini games or a style of gameplay where it's like you're in a level, there's a timer for 3 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
words flash saying push the button. There's a button in front of you. You have to push it in those 3 seconds. That's it. If you did it right, good job. If you didn't, you don't get the points and you move forward. And that is like it's simple because and that's hard. It's hard to make
Mm.
something that simple and gratifying at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But it also is a way you can like use a bunch of tutorials and learning Unreal to kind of put that
Yeah.
together and kind of using our narrative strengths as a studio have a wrapper around it. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the idea. And it
Mm-hmm.
was hard to just like I knew that was a hard piece of it. And like I didn't want to waver on it because I
Mm-hmm.
was like a lot of us have to program eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Or rather, I should say, having knowledge of implementation would change us for the better, whether it's implementation into RenP or RenPy, or I'm not sure how to properly say it. I'm too afraid to ask. But then Unreal or Unity, it's something that it's the little bit of sauce
Mm-hmm.
that a game writer or a narrative designer or a
Yeah.
technical narrative designer can leverage.
I want to interrupt you for 1 second,
Please
Armani.
interrupt me. I'm yapping.
No, you're good. You're good. So what we've done, I feel like we're doing Naj a disservice by not really explaining what the pitching process looked like.
Yeah, we keep talking around it. You're
We
so
keep talking
right.
around it. So like, I think we should ask Naj. We've talked around like, oh, we did the pitching process, but we didn't talk
Mm-hmm.
about like what it is, right?
You're so right. You're
Sure.
so right. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I mean, there were three phases basically. One being the phase before you all submitted your documentation and your presentation for people to be able to look over, and that was the part that took the longest, right? It was like the several months part. And then we had the voting phase, which was you guys presented, and then people were able to watch the recordings, look at the documentation, ask questions, and after it was just like, yeah, there's a winner, and like, here's what we do next. So during the the actual like pre-submission phase was where a lot of the stuff was being done. Obviously, you guys were asking for not just for opinions about like the game, like the actual game, but also like how to present it to people, right? Because that's the difficult thing about pitching. When we talk about pitching, often people will think about like, oh, when you pitch to a publisher or when you pitch to an investor or something like that. But in this context, what we were doing is we were persuading our fellow studio members to think, hey, that idea is really compelling and I really want to work on it. Which is something that I feel like everyone has to do on some level and every day in a creative industry, right? Because you have to like get other people, bought in on the idea that you have. And also, secondarily, that you have what it takes to like execute that idea as well. So you guys were doing a lot. Not only were you working on a game idea, you were working on the way to communicate that game well. Like Armani, like you said, that was like one of the things that I think you grappled with a lot. And then also like how to kind of neatly wrap it up in a 20-minute presentation and documentation that's easy to read as well. So yeah, you guys did a lot for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was. We were timed too. Like we had the timer going. Like I don't know about you, Armani, but I practiced a couple times. I did it like.
I could tell you guys practiced because everyone was on the dot, like 20 minutes. It was great.
Yeah.
We're
trying to keep it moving.
Part of the no. I have horror stories after you. Please tell me, talk to me.
I was like, I'm interested to hear the horror stories. I think one thing that's worth maybe talking about, just kind of to the thing that you just said, Najmah. The idea of kind of tuning our pitch to not sell it, but to well, let's get our fellow small owners interested in this idea.
Yeah.
And one thing I kind of found myself getting caught up in a little bit was trying to appeal, like adding a slide to appeal to every person on the feedback committee.
Interesting.
I took them out. I took them out.
Okay.
But like at a certain point, there was like because we had this not just the Discord server at large, but we had like a small group of 8-10 people that was like the pitching feedback committee, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Who are experts in different disciplines, which was great, very useful and helpful.
Absolutely.
But I found myself soliciting feedback and receiving great feedback, and then being like, great, I got this feedback. Now I must respond to that feedback directly in my presentation.
Right. Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you encountered that, Armani, which I think was both good and perhaps a net. It was both great because the feedback was fantastic and it helped me think larger than what was on the slide. But it also, I found myself being like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like responsive. Like I'm everything is like I have to react to this. Reactive.
Yeah. I absolutely felt that. I think some of the feedback I had at some point, like I had to filter like what was feasible and what wasn't feasible.
Exactly.
So I also tried to have every piece of my presentation appeal to what people were saying. Because like one piece of feedback was, I don't know what to make of a game that's in 2 parts, that's whole, like what am I even looking at here?
Right.
And I will take that, like what am I even looking at here? How do I respond to that? And kind of getting like reading between the lines, like, okay, what is confusing about it? Some people were like very upfront where it's like, is this something that can work independently? Where's the fun of them being connected? Another piece of feedback, which was funny, which I worked very hard to implement. I think a number of y'all were like, what if we played the game live on the pitch? And I was like, in what universe can I say, hey, here's how to play the game. Also, let's play the game right now in my 20-minute slot. But I also love a challenge. The reason I say horror story is because at the time I was juggling my job, and my job was like really demanding, even like outside of like main work hours. But then on top of that morning I was giving a workshop. I was giving a workshop to a colleague of ours on trend forecasting, and then immediately after was the pitch. And I was like, and that's why I was so ready, because like my brain was already wired, coffee in my veins, heart beating, and I was like, let's go. And I did try playing the game live during my pitch. And it was so hard. But yeah, I think like to Cam's point, like I think it's good that it challenged us so much, because it made us really test the ideas to the fullest.
Yeah.
And I also was trying to appeal to everyone because like you don't want anyone on the pitch committee to feel like we ignored them, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they're volunteering their time to tell us how to make
Yeah.
our ideas a bit more robust. So it felt like if I didn't address every piece of feedback, it would just be a slap in the face to anyone who was with us on those office hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
what were your thoughts, Naj?
No, what is so yeah, that was part of the process as well. I rallied some people together from who represented different disciplines to be able to give more qualified feedback than I could, certainly about certain things like whether it was like sound or UI UX or whatever. But one thing I will say is that like this is such a hard thing and like such an underrated thing and something that isn't spoken about, which is how do you balance keeping a clear vision and then getting feedback and then like not having that like steer the vision off course too much as well, because that's definitely something I found during the Ouroboros Express. It was very easy to be like, oh well, if I put this change it would have been a completely different game, you know. And so yeah, I completely understand that like you're wanting to accept feedback graciously, and you're also accepting, you know, you have the humility to be like, okay, yeah, maybe I don't know everything about this particular discipline, and I want to absorb that into my my game concept. But at the same time, there's also this like balancing factor of like, but I know that my vision of the game is this thing, and if I put this feedback in, it will change what the game is and what the experience is potentially. So it is really hard. Like I'm glad that you guys were able to kind of face that, like it's a studio simulator, be able to go through that on some level. The other thing which I found really interesting as well is that you guys had different challenges, right? And the way, and so like Armoni, I think with you had difficulty like explaining your concept in not so many words, and so I think that what we said was like, well, if you can't, well, why not show, not tell. Whereas Cam, I think for you, I think you had like a different challenge. I can't remember off the top of my head like what like the main stream of like what the main theme of like the feedback you got was, but like do you mind talking a little bit about that, because I find that really interesting.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think a lot of the feedback, not a lot of the feedback, some of the feedback that stuck out to me was just more of like systems at play. Like, what is the game like?
Right.
Kind of. What is it really?
Yeah.
Which I think is where I got a little bit caught up. Of I don't know, maybe like world building stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure. Like it was like, again, it's the kind of thing where it was like, you know, it's kind of clear up here, but then it's like, well, how do you sell it to other people?
How do you articulate that?
How do you articulate that? One of the this one that's just on my mind just because it stuck out to me. One of the pieces of feedback I got was specifically in regards to building UI UX, which is like cool. This is fantastic feedback to receive. I don't think it super applies to like the pitch document.
Yeah.
It's like, this is great feedback about like, yeah, if we're gonna have UI and UX, what would it look like in your game? It's like that's great. That's really fantastic to think about.
Yeah.
It doesn't really apply to this thing. Like, it doesn't, right? Because you want to be able, when you're presenting your thing, you want to be as complete of a vision as possible. And if that includes like, here's what the pause screen would look like, it's like, oh great. If it helps the people you're pitching to like see it better, then it's useful, right? Yeah. But I think I had trouble kind of carrying some of that over to bring the most complete vision. Does that make sense? Like, yeah. Exactly.
I think it speaks a lot to audience.
Yeah.
Who we're pitching to now is not like, we're pitching to peers who want to make a game with us versus pitching to some executive of a publisher. Who's like, I don't care what the pause screen's gonna look at, versus the person who is actively
right. So we were kind of doing a blend of both, really, because you want it to be as engaging as possible, but also you want to be able to speak to everybody, as you just said, to speak to everybody on the team who is providing feedback, who we're asking for that feedback from. I think one of the things that also, and I don't want to call it a mistake on my part, but I was pretty clear in my pitch about like, I want like maybe 2 writers, like maybe. And I think this, because I thought it would be an interesting challenge of like, well, what if we limited the amount of writing that's in this game? And then again, as the longer it went on, the more I kind of found myself like, well, maybe I don't feel as strongly about that as I thought that I did. But thinking about it now, I'm like, no, I think I'm right.
I think I was right.
I think I was right about that. But it's just something to think about. Like I think because the people who vote, I mean, we should also be clear that the people who voted on it were people who are in our Discord server.
Yeah, everyone, all the small owners.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I would, all is a strong word. I would say, like, how many, maybe this is a conversation for the, ooh, I almost
For
said
the
the name
data.
I almost said the name of the upcoming title, but I didn't.
Yeah.
No.
Maybe that's a conversation for when we bring them on.
Yeah.
Of like what the final like I would love to know, because there again, no spoilers, very clear vision, very clear, like, here's what it's about, here's what it is, and it was like, great, I see it instantly. I voted for that. That was my top vote was for that one.
Right.
So I would love to hear like what they think was attractive to people, and then what you saw in the metrics.
Absolutely.
You know, I think that would be an interesting contrast.
That would be
They're really cool.
interesting.
And just having like a little Spotify Unwrapped. Oh, how did each person vote? Yeah, I think actually data biz-wise, that actually be really interesting as well, because it's like in the swath of people that we did have involved in the process, really trying to find out how, I think everyone who pitched, it was such a fear of scope. Like, everybody who pitched was trying to make the smallest game, the most feasible game possible with the smallest team. I think one piece of feedback I got, which was funny, like for the audio, I was like 2 composers, and then someone left a comment, I think you should just have one. They're not gonna play nice. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So, but I think we were all just so concerned about how big or how small these games would be, because again, the brief requested a 6-month game.
Yeah.
And we had to think bigger than a game jam, but smaller than a indie title, you know?
Like which was a difficult, for me at least, a very difficult box to put myself in.
Right.
Because I think this is where you can lay it all out for us, Naj, because one of the goals for this pitching process was like give pitchers a better understanding of what a professional production timeline looks like.
Yeah.
And I was running up against that of like, I kind of don't know, which which was difficult to be confronted with, to be like, I don't super know about this.
Yeah.
I think it was the right call for the pitching process for sure, because it really made us very conscious of how long things take.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, please.
I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's definitely one of the things that I was kind of like a bit iffy about at the beginning when I was putting together the templates for the stuff that I wanted you guys to provide as part of the pitching process. And I was like, oh my god, is it going to be too much for them to like come up with a production timeline? And then I thought, no. But only because I feel like I put certain things in place. For example, the office hours, the pitching feedback committee, who didn't have producers on it, including myself as well, that if you were running up against that kind of thing, like, oh, I've come up against a thing that I didn't know, I can talk to someone who can inform me on like, well, actually, that's a bit silly, or maybe you could rework this here and there. Because ultimately, games are collaborative. You know, this wasn't meant to be like you're like an examination where you're like sat in a room for like 2 hours writing an essay, right? It's not like that at all. Like you are, it was absolutely designed to be that like you could reach out to people in the server and ask them for their support in terms of like giving their expertise or kind of like reworking your pitch or something like that. And I'm very glad that you said that, because like I think before we have had like misunderstandings from people like in teams, understandably, because like, a lot of us are new to this, of like how long is something actually going to take, and not even like delegating it to other people, but even for yourself as well, because I feel like sometimes the instinct is to overestimate yourself, right? When you're like, yeah, I'll do that.
Absolutely.
So it was good to kind of put you guys in those shoes of being like, okay, well, realistically, we have 6 months. And this is how I wanted you guys to think, right? Okay, you have 6 months. All right, we've got probably like a month of that for like polishing, which means we need to have like certain milestones that we have to hit, and then like work backwards from there. I'm really interested to know, like, how did you guys approach the knowledge gaps in the template?
Man, Cam, please.
Sure. So the template was interesting because it was a very fleshed out template. I found myself a little bit like chafing against some of the rigidity of it, which I think is that's the point of a structure.
Yeah,
That like it's imposing, it is literally imposing a structure to follow. And I
for
definitely
sure.
found myself a little bit
Yeah.
like I don't like it
I don't
felt
like it.
Oh no, yeah, I don't. Well, not less. I don't like it. Like I like structure. I like guidelines. I like having a clear like here is a direction to go. Like that is helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
What I found myself, I think this speaks to like my own insecurities. I found myself being like I don't know and I don't know how to find the knowledge.
Right.
Sometimes.
Interesting. Okay.
Particularly around like production timeline stuff. Like as much as I can
Mm-hmm.
research games that I think my game would look like,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's the other thing is I don't have an art or design background. I just have like I got ideas and I don't have a lot of those hard skills that would help me estimate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how long does it take to make a soundtrack? How long does it take to do a pixel art animation? Like I'm like I can look up, what XYZ indie studio did and how long it took them.
Mm-hmm.
And I like did a lot of that. I did a lot of sourcing like reference materials and stuff like that, but that doesn't apply to me directly.
Right.
So I definitely got very in my head about because one of the things in the template was provide an estimated production timeline,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is like it sounds like such a small thing. Provide an estimated production timeline for your
Yeah.
6-month production process,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it definitely was a little bit of like a not a hard stop, but it was a stumbling block for sure. Of like I kind of don't know how to approach this. I can have a
Right.
vague sense of what the first month or two would look like,
Sure.
but then after that I'm like this is kind of out of my wheelhouse. And as much as and like again I feel like I did an okay job of asking people how long do you think this would take,
Yeah.
but even then it's just very hard for me to put that all together.
Mm-hmm.
Good that it's
Totally get
there, and it's
Yeah.
very good to think about, especially if you want to do game directing, you have to think about that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even on this micro scale that we're doing,
Mhm.
volunteer production, like you still have to think about okay, but it's as Armani just said, it's actual people's time and energy. So you don't want to be stringing them along or being like it's this and then it's completely not at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll bring it up. I have another point, but I'm going to write it down so I don't forget.
You sure? You sure you
Somebody
wanna
else,
do it?
please. Jump. No. Go in there. Because it's kind of unrelated to this specific thing. I just think it's an interesting thing to
Gotcha.
bring up. But we'll get to it.
I think I first started with the parts that I did understand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like in the template it asked, "What's your game about? Who's your target audience?
Yeah.
What were some touchstones? Audio considerations,
stuff,
aesthetic." Yeah.
Yeah.
There were
For
literally
me.
things
Got it.
where it was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
because I was so paranoid about what this game is. A lot of that I was able to just fill in from like my 3 a.m. notes. Or things where I genuinely had no idea where it was like, are there any UI UX considerations?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Fonts,
Mm-hmm.
colorblind modes, and my answer was yes, all of them. Everybody needs this game. Come through. I think because the idea was both a tabletop situation and a digital one,
Mm-hmm.
it stuck out to my mind. Okay, the tabletop version is kind of what will provide the pillars for the digital version, and we need so much time for upskilling.
Right.
So a chunk of my timeline was just getting the game streamlined, getting the tabletop game. So for those who don't know, I've spoken to Naj about this idea before we even were pitching. And when telling her about it, her words echo in my mind like some elder being, where it was like, that could be done in a month. And I was like, all right, cool. I can do this tabletop part in the month, especially if I'm providing a core rule set for designers and writers to edit, and then using characters or mechanics from the tabletop game to inform how we learn. So those are my biggest things for me. That was like how I structured everything. I think one piece of feedback that was helpful for all of us was having milestones. By where do we want the game to be in 1 month, 2 month, 3 months time, etc.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
breaking it down from sprints further. So like that was kind of how I filled in any gaps. So making sure all the writing and the game design for the tabletop is set and having as much time for upskilling to learn Unreal in a specific gap of time. And when it came down to other aspects of it, like if we needed, I was completely fine with having a fleshed out tabletop and a vertical slice for Unreal and then just leaving it there, like moving on with everyone's life and just that's fine.
Yeah.
But then when it came down to, like, for example, in what would the UI of the digital version look like? And how will we implement that? One idea I had was we can kind of speed development along if we use assets from the Fab Marketplace, FAB. That's the marketplace that Unreal has available. So using a lot of templates, using a lot of those pre-made considerations. Also, we're using blueprints for a lot of it, and then finding other games in a similar way that also use blueprints. A lot of it was like, how can I keep this as streamlined as possible?
Sure.
And those gaps, a lot of those gaps started to fade away. And if I didn't know anything, I would just say I didn't know, or I'd ask a team member what they would think. So like audio, for example, I was like, let's use meta sounds, or like, let's make procedural synths that work within the Unreal Engine. And have that be part of the learning for our audio crew or composing team. It was just like, Cam, you were far more social about it. I literally did like, just lived in...
You went into your wizard's tower.
I went into my wizard's tower. I didn't talk to anyone, admittedly. And then I came back with like 5 examples and 5 tutorials, and I was like, this is how we can do it. I'm sorry for being antisocial. Please tell me I'm wrong, or if it's not feasible. I will totally meet you wherever. I don't like coming to people without having done my research, because if I get an obvious piece of feedback or question, I'm looking in the mirror like, why didn't you know that? I don't know, big dog. Like, I don't like that. But I also do want to ask Cam about the special consideration question, and then a nice little question to put a bow on this episode. But Cam, first you.
A special consideration? I'm sorry?
I have a special little question. The final set of questions.
Go ahead.
No, Cam, you had notes for questions you wanted. A question you wanted.
No, this wasn't even a note. This was just like a thing that happened. I'm sorry, not a question. It's just like, so during the sorry. I've confused and confounded you. So one of the cool things. So I think we all view Small Loan as like a little upskilling cooker.
Yeah.
Right. I think we all view it that way. I feel like I learn something every single day that I am in that server. Everybody's always contributing something very cool. Again, not to spoil it too much, but the next project is already like cooking up some really fantastic stuff. So one of the things that we try to do is, we're learning from each other and learning from industry professionals, right? And over the course of the last several months, we've been watching this. We just finished up the Double Fine documentary, the one about the making of Psychonauts 2.
Psycho Odyssey.
And one of the things that struck me watching that documentary, or after the fact actually, was part of the reason everybody's so stressed out in that documentary. This game took the better part of like a long time to make. It was a very long production process of this game, and part of the reason it was such a chaotic production process was that everybody thought that the milestones were not what they were.
Yes, yeah.
So how that kind of related to this process, like as kind of as you just said, Armani, like keeping milestones in line, I think was really, really helpful. Again, I think I did a bad job of it. No, truly, I'm not trying to be like, I'm being like, I don't think I did. Like that could be improved upon. Right. I think that is a thing that could be improved upon. We talk about wanting to, do we carry these projects forward?
Yeah.
So something over the course of watching that documentary with other Small Loan people that just kind of got me thinking about it was like, oh, everybody on that team making Psychonauts 2 didn't have a clear sense of what the milestones were and when they were supposed to be being met.
Yeah.
And I think in this pitching process, I thought, Armani, I think you did a good job of this, and some of the other pitchers did as well, of like, well, here's the milestones that we should hit, and here's when we should hit them. I was like, wow, that's very helpful for me to kind of get a sense of what other people are doing. I think I could continue to learn a lot from that, I think.
Absolutely. I think that perfectly segues into the thought, because I really want to know what's next for everyone's ideas. As well, and I'm really, really, really curious to ask you this, Naj, where it's like, what's next for the pitching process? I want to know, Cam, what's next for Folklorica? And I will gladly yap on about what's next for Sovereign Key. But my guest, please, indulge me.
Wow.
Naj, what's next for
I'm
this
swirling a
process?
glass.
Oh, hold on, I
It's
must,
swirling
please.
by.
What's next for your great works? Indulge me, I must know.
Very
Please.
good.
I felt like at the same time that you guys were learning a lot and really building up some really important skills and resiliencies towards like throughout the process, I was learning along with you. I was kind of like, oh yeah, here's definitely where there could be some give. Maybe this was a bit too structured, and we negotiated some of the stuff, I think, certainly over the process as well. And it also got me thinking, okay, yes, so I actually applied a lot of the stuff from the pitching process to a game idea I'm working on now, which was incredibly helpful. So I don't know if there's going to be like a future pitching round, but if there is, yeah, I mean, it would be cool to facilitate it. But we did hold a postmortem, and the learnings are pretty much available for anybody within the studio to take advantage of, which is one of the really great things about our culture in Small Learn, that we have that legacy of stuff that we've accumulated, that knowledge we've accumulated over time. So I don't know, we'll see in future.
Absolutely. You're an S tier producer. Like I think the word multi-class gets thrown around a lot with Small Loan, and I genuinely think if you're min-maxing your multi-classing build, producer is a subclass you absolutely should
You
put
want to put a
specs
couple
into.
points into
You want to
producer.
put it'll help you manage everything. And Cam, what's next for you in Folklorica?
I don't know. I
That's fair.
Next.
No, not at all. Like, well, one of the things that this whole thing highlighted for me was like putting out to, if I wanted to take this project further, it would require either getting very good at a lot of things I don't have any skills in.
Mm.
Not even very good. That's a, I feel like that trips up a lot of artists. Like, oh, if I can't do the thing perfectly, then why do it at all? Like, obviously,
Right.
don't think of it that way. But it would
Yeah.
require a fair amount of hard skills that I don't have if I wanted to take it solo.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I'm glad that my presentation showcase was, like, I feel like my reference materials were like pretty clear of like this is the kind of thing I'm inspired by.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really help. Like, you need original work
Mm.
to really pitch a thing, which I think, Armani, is why your pitch was pretty resonant for a lot of people, was because it was like all original. You built a system, you did the art, you make amazing music. It's like you like had a lot of that stuff like just in your wheelhouse. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I want to highlight it because I think that's the kind of stuff that is more helpful in a small scale production process like this. Like, for me, I would have had to outsource all of it. So if I want to take this project forward, I'm either going to have to learn how to do it all myself or outsource all of it, which is kind of like, well, we're back to the same place that we were.
Mm.
I don't think it's necessarily going to stop me from fleshing out the outline that I have a little more, or maybe digging into a little bit more of, okay, well, now that I have a better sense of what an efficient production timeline could look like, I think I can apply a lot of that stuff to the outline that I currently have.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I'll be able to make this thing a reality anytime in the near future, at least.
Interesting.
Well, actually, no, Naj, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to say, like, I think that there are some things that are, especially in the process and ideation of a game, that are going to take precedence over others. Like, art and UI UX maybe can come later on down the road, but I think for me, the journey I'm on is like, I need to learn about game design a little bit more to be an effective like game dev.
Absolutely.
You're gonna say what I think you're gonna say.
Yeah. So I think like I don't think it's necessarily having to learn lots of things, but I think learning how to prioritize, like, okay, there's like I could afford to learn more about this particular area to like really give this more form and more shape. So I do with that information what you will, but I think I did. It doesn't have to be everything. It may be like it might be some key areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also adding to Naj's statement, I thought you were going to go and invite Cam into the order, but may I offer you the idea, before I say my thing, to make it a tabletop game? I genuinely, thoroughly believe that tabletop is a part of the future. It has such a rich history, and also just if you think of tabletop game creation as paper prototyping for a digital game, it could assist with how the game is created. So like a couple of examples that for when I think of your game, right, I think of like Vermis, and
Sure.
like how
Yeah,
people
we
made
talked about Vermis.
made like we have and for those listening, if you're still here, we have talked about it, and like people have made really cool text adventures or fan games based on Vermis, and I'm like, Cam could totally do that. Or
I want to push back on that because that's not what the game is.
that's
But
absolutely
do you know what I
fair.
mean? Yeah.
I think if you make like the thing with tabletop is that because the constraints are dice or pieces and the human mind, I'm sure someone out there has a Metroidvania tabletop system. Like I know it has to exist, and but that's up to you. I know for me, I say that because that's the route I'm taking with Sovereign Key, where I'm fleshing out the system
Yeah.
and really just trying to get more people to play test it. I actually using the production timeline that was in the original pitch, where it's like this is where I want the tabletop version to be. As for if I'm going to have the Unreal component, kind of seeing how solid the tabletop version is, because I have NPCs, and then the next step would be what games would I make based on these NPCs.
Right.
For Sovereign Key, it is really leaning into the tabletop, getting play testers, getting feedback, doing art and stuff. And I would absolutely encourage you if you want to do tabletop. And also, you're not alone, Cam. You have your friends.
I'm not
Small
saying any of that stuff to be like I'm alone. That's not saying.
I'm messing.
That's not at all what I'm saying.
I'm messing. I don't know. I'm just saying. If you want, depending on how you may feel, but yeah, I think tabletop is the way, and I definitely want to give Sovereign Key a fair shake. At, just letting it being seen by the public, or like just even my close friends, and trying to see what works and what doesn't work, because like it was, I think, and to Naj's the grand vision, it's you walk away from this process with a tangible idea, and it's like none of this effort would go to waste, right?
Yeah.
None of the projects that I've seen in this pitching process, from the one that is currently under pre-prod, from any of the others, that hopefully we can get a lot of the other pitchers to like share their stories as well.
Yeah.
Every single project has such a high level of thought and care and consideration to it that there's no way you could walk away with your pitch and be like, I guess we're done, in my humble opinion. But I'm really excited to see what everyone does in the future with their projects.
Me too.
But before we end up wrapping up, any closing remarks, and where can people find you? Where can we experience your brilliance? Hold on, I need my little swirling glass. Indulge the good people where we could find you.
That's very funny. I don't really have a lot of social media. I'm on Blue Sky at Action Daxon, but I don't use it that much. LinkedIn, I guess. I don't know. Send me your finest job offers.
Carrier pigeon. I only accept the finest job offers.
No, or any of them, please.
You know what?
Too real.
For real.
Too real.
No.
Edit that. But yeah. I'm. That's mostly where I am these days.
And Naj, where can we find you?
So, luckily I have a pretty unique name, Najmah Salam, najmahsalam.com. You can find me pretty easily on Blue Sky and LinkedIn as well. Play the Ouroboros Express if you haven't already.
Please, yes.
Yes.
Leave a review.
Leave a review, yes. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's been lovely chatting.
Awesome. Well, it's always a pleasure. You both are incredible people, and all the times we can watch game dev videos or work on each other's projects is always a treat in my heart. This is Armoni Boone. You can find me on LinkedIn. You have my name. And you can find me on social media at Monihym, MoniHymn. And with that, we bring a close to the Small Loan podcast, aka the SmallCast. Thank you everyone for listening.
Bye. Did you say arrivederci? Wow.